182 people dead in Lebanon yesterday. A misunderstanding. That's crazy. And then, so this afternoon, like nobody saw this coming, and I'm not being sarcastic. I'm not being snarky. Nobody saw this coming. You can't get this out of the headlines no matter how hard they try, even if they try to distract us with a war. Melania Trump, of all people, walked into the grand foyer of the White House and said the lies. She talked about Epstein. Like, I thought, shh, don't talk about Epstein. Said that the lies linking her to Jeffrey Epstein need to end today. She did that unannounced. Several of her own aides didn't know what she was going to say. She said Epstein didn't introduce her to Trump. Fine. She says she's never been named in any court documents or victim statements. That's true, and it matters. But she also addressed the email, the one released by the Justice Department, written to Ghislaine Maxwell, talking about a magazine article about J.E., which is Jeffrey Epstein, one would assume, asking about Palm Beach, signed Love Melania. She called it a casual correspondence, a trivial note. And then this part. She called on Congress to hold public hearings for Epstein survivors. Democrats immediately said, yeah. So the First Lady, on the same day her husband is selling his ceasefire victory to the world, just handed the opposition a public Epstein hearing on a silver platter. I don't know what's happening in the White House, but between a misunderstanding that killed 182 people and Love Melania to Ghislaine Maxwell, today is a lot. And perhaps Steve Schmidt, the co-founder of the Lincoln Project and the amazingly successful and illuminating podcast, Substack, The Warning, joins us now. Steve, thanks for joining. Where do we start? Do we start with Melania? You want to start with the war? But Melania. What got into her? What's happening?
You asked me a question right before we started. First off, good to see you, Don.
Good to see you. Thank you, sir.
You asked me a question right before we started. You were like, is it possible that nobody in the White House had any idea she was going to do this? And my initial reaction to that was, yeah. It just seems to me, it feels like one of those things when you work in the White House that happens that you have no idea about, where you're just like, WTF, just happened. And so she goes out there and defies a lot of photographic evidence that she didn't have a relationship with these people. She had a deep relationship with Jeffrey Epstein and with Ghislaine Maxwell. And I know that, and you know that, and the legends know that, and everybody knows that because we've read the files that have been released, by the way, which account for only half the files which have been released. And a lot of these victims have NDA agreements with their abusers. Many of them were identified publicly by the incompetence and the amorality by which all of this was handled by the Pam Bondi Justice Department. They don't want to be in public hearings. The victims haven't asked for congressional hearings. Everybody knows what happened to the victims. The issue here is who abused those victims. And we get to that with the full release of the files. And by the way, we know that there are a few people who appear more in those files than Epstein's best friend, Melania's husband, Donald Trump, who was investigated by the FBI for assaulting and abusing and preying on a 13-year-old. The FBI interviewed that minor 13-year-old multiple times, found those allegations credible enough to keep investigating. And so Melania Trump here in this statement, from the pretense, the arrogance, the walk-on, as if she's the head of state, presidential seal affixed to her podium. This isn't an official event. This isn't a White House event, and she's not co-president. It's a really astounding assertion, I think, of her ego and maybe of a very guilty conscience But once again, the main story here is there's a Trump in front of a camera who's lying because she clearly has a relationship with these people.
Well, you're right that, the walk-on, I noticed when that she walked out, and I was like, what is this? Is this is she going to announce her presidency? Is she going to do something about the war? Like, what was this?
She's got the seal on the podium, and that's the seal that would be affixed, for example, to the podium if the Canadian head of government, the prime minister, was here, if Netanyahu was here, if the British prime minister was here. She's not entitled to its use in that situation. I think that she has an appreciation. It should go without saying that her poll numbers, which are abysmal at record lows, the most unpopular first lady in American history, and then some, but all of it takes place in the context of this nearly $100 million movie that no one wanted to see, that was no audience for it anywhere. And, in the aftermath of all of that, there's all of this.
Is this reputation rehab or poll number rehabs? Let's play the poll numbers, and then you can answer that question on the other side. And I have to ask you some other stuff. I want to get back to the did he know or not, but this is CNN reporting on his poll numbers.
What are you seeing
her poll numbers,
about Melania Trump and how her polling is shifting?
Yeah, I would say that the American people really don't care for Melania Trump. Take a look at this. All right, let's take a look at Melania Trump's net favorable ratings. Look at this. The lowest ever. The lowest ever. We're talking about now 12 points underwater. If you go back a little bit more than a year ago, she was 3 points above water. You go back at this point, about this point in term number one for Donald Trump. Look at that. She was 30 points above water. So at this point, historic lows for Melania Trump. These numbers are absolutely awful.
One of the questions is why?
Okay.
Why?
That's good.
Yeah.
So she's right. The question is why? Is it because people smell a rat that they know something is up with Donald Trump? They're sick of his shenanigans, and she keeps standing by her man. Like, what is it? Why are her numbers? Because it's not usually that bad for first.
The country's gotten to know her. The country's figured it out, and truly, there's just nothing there. Just ice, coldness. Be best. She is a farce. Wrapped in an office that doesn't really exist, the office of First Lady. This demented man, this obscene marriage, his long legacy of abuse. She is an apologist for it. She is corrupt. She is a grifter like him. And in the end, she's delusional. When you look back a few weeks ago at her speech where she talked about how lonely it is at the top and her life is a visionary, she's as delusional as any person in that high Trump orbit, which is saying something. And you can tell the degree of the delusion from the walk-on. I mean, imagine what it was like to be in the planning meetings for this event with the staff as they're rehearsing the speech. It's delusional.
Well, the weird thing for me is that when you talked about whether they know or not, and as usual with this White House, with this administration, conflicting reports, Steve, this was the first report, and from someone who was with the president, I believe. Roll it.
Yeah, Nicole, that is the question that we're all asking today. In fact, I just got off a very quick call before we went to air with President Trump, who said he was in the middle of a war meeting and that he couldn't talk for very long and had to go, but that actually he had no prior knowledge to the topic that Melania Trump, his wife, was going to be touching upon today in his statement. In her statement, he then repeated that he had to go, but before we hung up the phone, he said that she didn't know him, presumably referring to Jeffrey Epstein.
Okay, she didn't know him, and then CNN reported this a little bit later.
Hearings. Now, one source familiar says President Trump did get a heads up this was coming, but certainly adding momentum to an issue that they have sought to tamp down, Casey.
So, is she Does she have something up her sleeve here? Like, look, Steve, this is. Oh, let me just put it in technical terms for you. This is some weird shit, man.
I think she feels that Sarah Ferguson juju, right? I think that she feels the stink wafting off of her. And I think she feels trapped by all of it, and she's got a story to tell. She's been convinced by someone that she has to say something about Epstein, that it makes her look bad, not just Donald. And so here's the performance. And she's gone out there and said something that can be refuted with this photo. These people hung out with one another. This is the Epstein class. And Donald Trump is king of the Epstein class. Melania is queen of the Epstein class. She is Donald Trump's third wife. A lot of people say that she was introduced to Donald by Jeffrey Epstein. Mm-hmm. But what's the point that they're trying to argue here today? That I didn't know the people